Darkness in Japanese culture has never been merely the absence of light. It is alive, watchful, reaching out from beyond the thin veil that separates the worlds. Japanese folklore is filled with spirits and shadows, entities untouched by time, immune to oblivion. And among this silent chorus, one figure stands apart. A whisper that bends the breath of night itself. She is Kayako. To the world, she is the face of the grudge. The crawling woman. The rasping voice. A nightmare that refuses to let go. But her story runs deeper, much deeper, into the oldest fears of Japan. To understand her, we must return to the Heian era, the 9th and 10th centuries. At the imperial court, the belief in Onryō was born, vengeful spirits, born of rage, betrayal, and despair. It was said that those who died in anguish, or by unjust hands, could come back. Not as memories, but as storms. As death itself. Ancient chronicles speak of intrigues, sudden illnesses, and unexplained deaths, all laid at the feet of these restless ghosts. The Onryō wore many faces. Sometimes women in white funeral kimono, their black hair hanging loose. Sometimes shadows without shape, pure darkness that took form only to strike. But they were always the same at heart, relentless, insatiable, consumed by the need for vengeance. Centuries later, their presence spread into Edo period scrolls. Artists painted them slipping from the corners of homes, reaching out with pale hands for those who wronged them. On the Kabuki stage, actors in white robes and flowing wigs gave them tragic life. The audience fell silent, because deep down, they knew such stories might not be stories at all. Kayako is born from this memory. Her hair, her face, her silence, all trace back to that lineage of spirits. But she is more than a legend bound to the past. She escaped it. She crossed into our age. In the 20th century, Japanese filmmakers found her waiting. Drawn again and again to the image of the female ghost, they gave her new voice in a nation scarred by war and loss. The onryo became a symbol that pain cannot be buried. It returns. And it seeks revenge. And so, in modern culture, a new language of horror was born. The long-haired ghost was no longer a trope. She was an archetype. And in that archetype, Kayako rose. Not by chance. Not by invention. She is the child of centuries. Every gesture, every sound, an echo of Japan's deepest fears. And at the same time, she speaks to us all, because the terror is universal. The past never truly dies. It finds a way back. This is where we first meet Kayako. Not as a movie character, but as the continuation of a chain of stories, stretching from imperial courts to painted scrolls, to the stages of Kabuki theater. Stories of spirits that refuse to leave. Stories of pain that outlives human life. Stories that crawl and whisper. For millions of viewers around the world, Kayako is not a legend and not a myth, but the living embodiment of fear. Her body, twisted by unnatural movements. Her hair, falling like a black veil across her face. Her voice, reduced to a rasp that settles forever inside the listener's ear. Since the early 2000s, this face of horror has firmly entered the cultural memory of humanity. But like any archetype, its power is not in special effects, but in what lies behind them. Western cinema created fear for decades according to the same rules. A sudden flash, a loud scream, a fast killer chasing the victim. Fear was built on speed. It worked through surprise. Kayako breaks these rules. She does not run. She does not scream. She does not openly attack. She simply is. And that is her most terrifying feature. Psychologists note, the strongest sense of anxiety arises not at the moment of attack, but in waiting. A person who sees a figure crawling toward them from the darkness cannot look away. They understand, this is the end. But the end does not come immediately. Kayako turns time into a weapon. Her image is based on ancient Japanese theater traditions. In Kabuki and No, actors portrayed spirits through distorted movements, sharp, slow, unnaturally twisted. These movements signal to the audience, before you is not a human, but a shadow. Kayako repeats this technique. Her body breaks familiar mechanics. When she descends the stairs or crawls across the floor, the audience does not see acrobatics, but a violation of reality itself. Anthropologists call this the uncanny valley effect, when something looks human but behaves in a way that the brain refuses to accept. This is what makes every movement of Kayako unbearable. Her rasp is another weapon. Unlike the loud screams of Western films, Kayako's sound is quiet. It does not deafen, it seeps in. In Japanese culture, the voice of spirits was always important. It was believed that a ghost spoke not in words, but in echoes of pain. Kayako sounds exactly like that. Her breath is not the sound of lungs, but the testimony of death. The filmmakers made her rasp as minimalist as possible. It is not a soundtrack, not a special effect, but a simple, almost bodily sound. And precisely because of that, it acts so strongly on the subconscious. But most important of all is the place of action. The house where Kayako dwells becomes a character in its own right. Its corridors are narrow, its stairs steep, its doors creak. This is not a Gothic mansion or a castle, it is an ordinary Japanese home. Every viewer understands, you could live in such a house today. They recognize the walls, the sliding paper doors, the old stairs. Kayako is terrifying not only by herself, but because her world is our world. She does not invade Dracula's castle. She invades everyday life. Philosophers of horror distinguish between two types of fear, the fear of what might happen and the fear of what is already inevitable. Western horror most often plays with the first type. We fear that the killer will catch us, that the monster will appear, that the door will open. But there is always a chance of escape. With Kayako there is no chance. She always reaches her victim. It does not matter where you run, whom you call, which doors you lock. The curse does not break. This turns her image into a symbol of total hopelessness. Fear becomes philosophical. It tells us there are forces from which there is no escape. When The Grudge hit theaters, audiences around the world experienced cultural shock. They encountered a new language of horror. Western critics wrote, "We do not understand why this is so frightening, but we cannot look away." That is the mark of a true archetype. It bypasses culture and acts directly on the psyche. Kayako became an international symbol of fear. Her rasp was recognized everywhere. Her silhouette was copied in ads, in jokes, in fan films. But the more she was parodied, the clearer it became. Behind the parody lies the real horror. Most classic monsters wear masks. Jason with his hockey mask, Michael Myers with his blank white face, the Phantom with his makeup. Kayako terrifies precisely because she does not. Her face is human, and that makes it unbearable. We see a woman. We understand that she once lived, loved, suffered. And that is the true horror. Because her hatred and her pain are real. Feminist scholars point out that Japanese horror, unlike Western horror, made the female image central. The female ghost is not a victim, but a source of power. But this power is born of suffering. Kayako is the victim of male violence, transformed into an eternal avenger. She is the symbol of repressed pain returning, becoming destructive. This makes her image especially modern. In a world that increasingly talks about trauma and its consequences, Kayako reminds us, nothing ever disappears completely. In the end, Kayako's face is the face of memory. She does not let us forget. Everyone who enters her house encounters not just a ghost, but a story of betrayal, violence, and pain. And that story is eternal, because those feelings are eternal. For millions of viewers, Kayako is not just a character. She is a reminder that horror does not always come from outside. It lives within. It is in the house, in memory, in the body. Kayako is the face of horror. And it is staring at us. Fear is a contagion. It spreads from one mind to another, from one culture to another, from one generation to the next. What began as a whisper in the darkened rooms of a Heian palace, what resurfaced in the Kabuki theaters of Edo, what crawled into the cinemas of the 20th century, has now become a virus in the 21st. Kayako, once confined to folklore and then to the flickering light of film, has escaped those boundaries. She is no longer just a ghost. She is a symbol. She is a story that keeps retelling itself, mutating, adapting, and persisting. Her curse has gone viral. When The Grudge arrived in American cinemas, it carried with it more than subtitles. It carried a new form of fear. Western audiences, conditioned by decades of masked killers and monsters that could be shot or burned, were suddenly confronted with inevitability. Kayako did not chase. She did not roar. She simply existed, and in existing, destroyed. Hollywood remakes, sequels, and reboots brought her further into global consciousness. Each retelling altered small details, shifting settings and changing victims, but never touched the essence, the pale woman with hair like a shroud and a voice like death itself. By translating her into a Western framework, Hollywood inadvertently amplified her reach. The curse spread, just as in the story itself. Anyone who entered the house was infected, and so too was anyone who entered the cinema. But horror has a paradoxical twin: comedy. As Kayako's image grew in strength, it also grew in parody. Comedians mimicked her crawl, sketch shows lampooned her rasp, internet memes plastered her face onto absurd backdrops. Laughter seemed to disarm her. Yet the very need to laugh revealed something deeper, fear so profound that it demanded release. Humor became an exorcism, a way for audiences to pretend control over an uncontrollable figure. But behind every parody lingered the truth. Kayako remained terrifying because she was not bound to special effects. She was bound to the deepest anxieties of human existence. Psychologists began to examine why Kayako resonated so strongly across cultures. Their findings were chilling. First, her universality. The betrayal of love, the violence of family, the terror of home transformed into danger. These themes exist everywhere. No translation is required. Second, her inevitability. Human beings fear above all else the loss of agency. We can flee from a killer, reason with a monster, resist an enemy. But we cannot resist inevitability. Kayako is inevitability personified. Third, her simplicity. No elaborate mythology is needed to understand her. A pale face, long hair, a sound. That minimalism makes her unforgettable, a perfect virus for the human mind. Across forums, interviews, and whispered conversations, one pattern emerged. People dream of Kayako. Not of the actress, not of the film, but of her. They dream of the hair falling forward, of the crawl in the darkness, of the rasp at their ear. In dreams, she no longer belongs to cinema. She belongs to the unconscious. Carl Jung wrote of archetypes that live in the collective psyche, patterns of imagery that humanity shares. Kayako has become one of these archetypes. She has joined the ranks of the mother, the shadow, the trickster, but her domain is terror. She is the whisper in the night that says, "The past is not gone." Anthropologists began to compare her with similar figures worldwide. In Mexico, La Llorona, the weeping woman who drowned her children and now haunts rivers. In Slavic lands, the Rusalka, the spirit of a betrayed woman who lures men to their deaths. In Celtic tradition, the Banshee, whose wail foretells death. Every culture knows her, though by different names. Kayako is not an exception. She is a continuation, a modern mask for an ancient face. What happens when fiction becomes belief? Reports surfaced of people hearing the rasp in their homes, of seeing a pale figure in photographs, of dreams that refused to end upon waking. Online communities grew, dedicated to real encounters with Kayako. Skeptics dismiss these as tricks of imagination, primed by cinema. But belief is its own form of reality. If enough people believe the house is haunted, then it is. Fear changes behavior. Fear alters lives. Fear is real, even if the ghost is not. Thus the curse escapes the screen. Like any virus, it needs only a host. We live now in the age of endless screens. Fear no longer lives only in theaters. It streams, it loops, it is clipped into seconds for TikTok, remixed on YouTube, shared endlessly. Teenagers crawl across bedroom floors to imitate Kayako. Artists paint her face in glowing neon. Her rasp becomes a sound effect endlessly replayed. She has become a digital phantom, haunting not a single house but every phone, every feed. The irony is unmistakable. Kayako was once bound to a cursed home. Now, her home is everywhere. The virus has no walls. But what truly sustains Kayako's curse is not technology. It is memory. She embodies the truth that pain does not vanish, that trauma echoes across years, across generations. Victims of violence, of war, of betrayal, all can see themselves in her. She is their mirror. She is what it feels like when the past will not die. And so audiences do not merely watch her. They recognize her. The curse is recognition itself. Philosophers speak of two types of horror, the monstrous external and the inescapable internal. Kayako unites them. She is both ghost and memory, both attacker and reminder. This is why she cannot be killed, why sequels never end her. Because she is not a creature. She is an idea. And ideas do not die. And so we arrive at the truth. The story of Kayako is not about a single woman in a single house. It is about the virus of fear and how it travels. From Heian court to Edo stage, from cinema reel to smartphone, from screen to dream. Her curse is the curse of memory. The betrayal that cannot be undone. The scream that cannot be silenced. The trauma that refuses burial. And in that sense, Kayako has already won. Because every time we speak her name, every time we replay her rasp, every time we imagine her crawl, we give her life again. We become her hosts. The curse is not confined to a film. The curse is us. So when you sit in the dark, and the house creaks, and the air feels heavy, remember, you are not alone. Kayako has escaped the screen. She is no longer bound by walls or reels. She crawls in memory. She whispers in culture. She breathes in the collective night. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you will hear her rasp. Which other Asian spirits should we cover in this series? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and whichever one gets the most love might just crawl into the spotlight in a future episode. Thanks for watching. And remember, if you hear a strange croaking sound in the middle of the night, don't panic. It's probably just your pipes. Or maybe it isn't. Sweet dreams. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you like them, and want to listen to more, feel free to subscribe and put on your notifications. I upload almost every day.